Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 14.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge, and today we have an episode where we're going to talk a lot about scholarships. Now, there's a lot of people out there that love the idea of winning scholarships and using scholarships to pay for school, but there's a lot of challenges associated with scholarships and how the scholarships work. So there's about half an hour or 40 minutes of great information on how to apply for scholarships, where to find scholarships, and everything you need to know to start building a plan around scholarships for your family. If you know someone that could benefit from this podcast, I would appreciate it if you'd pass it along to them. And without dragging things on, let's jump into the scholarship presentation. So let's delve into scholarships. To start with, let's define what a scholarship is. A scholarship is money that's provided to students to help them pay for higher education, typically a bachelor's degree or associate degree, perhaps graduate level degrees, but scholarships to have further education for students. Why are people so interested in scholarships? Well, obviously, scholarships provide money that does not need to be paid back as compared to loans where you would pay them back. Now, there's often some confusion between the concept of scholarships versus grants. A general rule of thumb, scholarships are money that you receive because you've earned it. So a scholarship might be associated with your academics, your athletics. It may be provided by a wealthy donor of some sort, but a lot of times it's associated with it being earned. And in general, grants are associated with being needed. In other words, it's based somehow on the financial need of the recipient. Now, those are just general associations. Some colleges will use scholarship and grant more interchangeably, where they'll call something that looks kind of like a scholarship by my definition, but they'll use the word grant in the title, or the other way around. Sometimes they provide grants, but they call them scholarships. From a financial perspective, they both work well to pay for college. There's not a lot of difference, and there's no official guidelines as far as the IRS or government or whatever that would restrict what you call what. So there's no official rules, but that's kind of the summary of grants and scholarships. Now, so what do we do about scholarships? I think families need to really understand scholarships, and we're going to dive into it a little bit, but you need to understand scholarships from a perspective that's a lot broader than, free money for college. Yes, I want some. Of course, everybody wants free money for college, but when you start talking about scholarships, there's potentially some work involved. And how much time and effort you might spend looking for scholarships and applying for scholarships needs to be planned out, because that time could also be spent improving your ACT score by taking a prep class or working at the local fast food and earning money to save for college. That time could be spent pursuing career opportunities or understand college visits or all the other pieces of the puzzle that you need to be working on. I think the reality of scholarships is a lot of people say they want them, but in the end, I don't see as many people pursue them as say they would like to when they're just starting out. So as an example, let's say you have a junior right now. Most families that have juniors don't really understand the scholarship process, but they think they would like some. Unfortunately, they don't pursue it very hard as a junior, and the next thing you know, now you have a senior. And those scholarships are still very important, and now you're starting to see the prices of schools and realizing that college is expensive. And as you start delving into the scholarship applications, you realize that they're a lot of work. A typical, if your idea of pursuing scholarships is you assign it to the student and say, all right, little Johnny, it's your job to go get a bunch of scholarships. Now, it's not like little Johnny doesn't want scholarships. They certainly, most kids do intend to pursue them. But if you just push the entire task onto little Johnny is also busy filling out college applications and visits and trying to figure out what majors he wants to pursue. And he's doing all the other college stuff in addition to finishing high school and maintaining his grades and trying to figure out if he's going to go to prom or not and all those kinds of things. So little Johnny is generally busy. So often what happens is the scholarship applications get delayed and they just sit around. Again, most juniors and seniors in high school do not know how to raise funds. They do not know how to fill out scholarship applications, and they intend to do it as soon as they find a little bit of time. And then weeks go by and deadlines pass. And in the end, the scholarship opportunities have come and gone and they weren't looked at seriously. So I guess that's point number one is if you think scholarships are appropriate, figure out how much time and effort you're willing to put into it and figure out if it's time and effort that's appropriate compared to all the other things that you could put the same amount of time and effort into. Should you pursue scholarships or better test scores? And what types of scholarships are you going to pursue? Are you going to use the shotgun approach and apply to 45, 55, 100 different scholarships, or are you going to use the rifle approach and pick just 5 and do the best you can on those 5? So that's, I guess, where you start. Think about it from that perspective of, well, what are my goals here? How much time do I have? And then let's delve into now a little more specifics about scholarships. So the first point is scholarships can be divided a number of different ways, but one way that you can look at scholarships is you can group it into institutional scholarships and private scholarships. So institutional scholarships are scholarships that come from the institution you intend to attend. So let's say you're considering Emory College. If Emory offers you a scholarship, then you can use that scholarship, but you can only use it at Emory. You couldn't pursue Emory, get a scholarship from Emory and say, thank you very much. I'm taking my scholarship to Loyola and we're going to spend the money there. Any scholarships you get from most colleges need to be used at that college. Private scholarships, on the other hand, are scholarships that you can use anywhere. A typical scholarship might come from a sponsoring corporation or organization. Coca-Cola and Kohl's and Target all operate large scholarships. So you can pursue those scholarships outside of the institution you're attending. And if you win one of those scholarships, you can use that money at any of the colleges you're considering. So first we have institutional scholarships, then we have private scholarships. So that's one way we can divide the bucket. For a lot of families, pursuing the institutional scholarships is relatively easy because you have a short list of schools you're considering. So you don't have to look far and wide. You have to figure out how do scholarships work at the 6 colleges I applied to, or 10, or whatever the number is. Whereas when you get to the private scholarships, now there's literally hundreds or thousands of scholarships that might be a good fit for your student. And sifting through them all and understanding which ones are a good fit and which ones you should actually take the time and effort to apply to is the challenge. Now, again, another way that we can divide the scholarship pie is between need-based scholarships and merit-based scholarships. About 2/3 of the money out there available for college in the form of scholarships is tied to need. In other words, it's a scholarship that an institution, sometimes it's the colleges themselves, sometimes it's an outside institution, but they want to provide it to students that show a need, where their income and their assets are such that and it could be tied directly to the financial aid forms, or it could be a tangential need. In other words, they could say, well, based on your FAFSA and your financial aid calculations, you must show a need. And that need is defined by the financial aid system, which we cover in other podcasts. But they also might tie it to a need where they set their own parameters. They might say, well, family income has to be, $50,000 or less, and that makes you eligible. So it's not tied to the official need definition. It's just tied to a definition that they've created, but it does have undertones that say this is for families that show a need for the money. And then we have merit-based scholarships. Merit-based scholarships are scholarships that are awarded based on other criteria, such as academics or athletics, clubs or organizations that you belong to, or grandma and grandpa belong to, or mom and dad belong to, corporations that have an affiliation with your majors. There's all kinds of reasons why merit-based scholarships may be a good fit for what you're doing. In addition to that, some scholarships would actually be both. They're based on high academic achievement as well as having a need. So not only do you have to do well on a particular test, let's say, but you also have to show a need. So some scholarships would require both pieces of that puzzle. So let's move into how we pursue scholarships, or what do we do? And there's really 4 steps to the scholarship process. The first step is the scholarship search. How are you going to find the scholarships that are a good fit for your student? And again, how much time and effort are you willing to put into this? So the search process, again, depends on what scholarships you're looking for. But if you're looking at just the institutional scholarships, going directly to the colleges you're interested in, you can go to their websites, you can talk to their financial aid office. finding scholarships at the colleges you're going to attend, there's 5 or 6 places you could look, and you might want to spread it out and look around more than just the financial aid office. But again, there's a relatively short list of places you can look. You can look at alumni associations. You can look at the financial aid office. You can look at the various departments within the college. So sometimes the education department might have a scholarship that's directed to just education majors. Alumni associations associated with that college. So again, there's a few places you can look. The college's websites as well. But if you're also looking for the private scholarships, now there's literally thousands of places you can look and thousands of potential scholarships that you may need to sift through. When you move into private scholarships, now you're looking at all the various corporations that provide scholarships, all the professional organizations, all the local businesses, the local clubs and organizations, the high school itself. So there's all kinds of places that you might be able to find private scholarships. And when you open it up to searching for and applying to private scholarships, you're certainly adding a lot more opportunity, but you're adding a lot more work as well. So let me give you a couple examples on the searching side of things. I had a student who was a really strong writer, now 10th in his class, was very interested in finding some scholarships, and he started early in his junior year, and he found scholarships at the colleges he was going to attend. He found scholarships associated with his skills in writing. He found scholarships where mom and dad worked. He found scholarships where some of the organizations that mom and dad belonged to professionally. He found scholarships at the colleges he was attending and scholarships from the alumni of the college he was attending. In all, he applied to 42 scholarships. Of those 42 he applied to, he won 7, and the total value of that was about $39,000. Now, he's the exception, not the rule. There's many, many people out there that win 1 or 2 scholarships. Winning 7 and 8 and 10 scholarships is relatively unique. Now, I'm not saying that you or your student couldn't do that, but it's rare. The people that can and do that often will write a book on the subject. So you can read there are books out there about just this topic, the Scholarship Winner Guide, written by a scholarship winner. That search process was pretty long and drawn out. So if you're going to search far and wide, you need to budget a lot more time to find the scholarships. So there's, what are some other techniques that you can use? Well, again, if you think about the search process outside of the colleges you're looking for, now you need to find scholarships that are a good fit. There are literally thousands of scholarships out there, but you want to find the ones that you have a chance to win. So you need to find ones that are somehow associated with your student. So if your student has a particular skill, that may be something you would search on, or particular talent, or a particular uniqueness. If they survived an unusual disease, there might be scholarships out there. If they are unusually short or tall, or if they have a particular ethnicity, or they've done really well in some obscure area. If they're a really strong musician and play antique instruments, there might be the antique instrument scholarship out there. Or if they play an unusual sport, if they're into fencing or skateboarding or something along those lines, where it may limit the number of applicants because not everybody is a fencer. So all of a sudden, if you say, well, how many fencers are attending college next year, it may greatly limit the number of applicants they get. What about the myth that we hear that there's millions and millions of dollars in scholarships that goes unclaimed? As you're searching for scholarships, you'll realize that most scholarships are working hard to be well publicized, and they get many, many applicants, and they do award the scholarship. There are those rare scholarships that go a little bit underutilized, but they're not the $10,000 award from Coca-Cola or the $5,000 award from a big corporation, and they're probably not the scholarships that show up on all the various websites. Where a lot of the scholarship rumors come from is the fact that there's many colleges out there that award scholarships to students who choose to go to a different college. Therefore, there's a scholarship that goes unclaimed. That's not exactly true, because most colleges award a lot more scholarships than they have students coming, because they know a large number of the students that they're pursuing will ultimately choose to go to a different school. So they might award twice as many scholarships in order to get the right number to actually accept and turn up at their college. So again, as you're searching, what are some techniques that you might be able to use? Well, certainly there's the internet. The internet is a wealth of information when it comes to searching for scholarships. There's a number of scholarship websites out there. There's scholarships.com, there's FastWeb, College Confidential. There's all kinds of places. CapEx. There's a number of ways that you can find scholarships. And a lot of these websites are reasonably reputable, and they're free. Well, what does that mean? Well, how can they possibly provide all this information and do it for free? And the way that this works essentially is scholarship providers put their information into the databases for the scholarship websites. Once it's there, they provide this information to students and families, and they collect your contact information. So these websites make money by showing advertising to the students and the parents. They also make money by potentially collecting your email addresses and other data and selling it to other advertisers. And they potentially make money by helping the colleges themselves market their college to your student. There's nothing wrong with that inherently, other than just realize that that's some of the things that they're up to. So again, some recommendations or strategies, set up a separate email address. So they're not, the websites aren't using your work email as example and sending you unsolicited email every couple days or even daily. The hidden gems when it comes to scholarships, you need to look elsewhere for. Again, there may be a scholarship drawer at your high school for the very local scholarships. So a local charitable organization or a local men's club or women's club might offer say $1,000 scholarship. They may not be sophisticated enough to get their information out to the various websites, but they often will send the information to the local high schools and say, all right, anybody that lives in this community can apply for this scholarship, and they send it to the high school. Often it's the counseling staff at the high school that gets this information, and they put that in a website, or perhaps they put that in the scholarship drawer for students to come and look through and find it. Then you can do advanced searches on the internet through newspapers and those types of things. Searching for terms like your local community, say in my community, Milwaukee scholarship winner, or Georgia football scholarship, or Texas chess champion scholarship, or whatever it might be, in order to find scholarships that are associated with what you're doing. And then change the keywords a little bit. Instead of saying scholarship, you might say scholarship application, or search within photos. If you search your local newspaper or your local community for Fond du Lac, let's say, is your community, and you're searching and you find, and you do it under the images instead of the actual text. So you search for scholarship winner Fond du Lac within the images of Google. What pops up when you do that? Well, pictures of scholarship winners. So now you have pictures of scholarship winners in the local community, and usually you can click on the picture and get back to the original newspaper article or blog post or wherever it came from, and that will give you more information about the name of the scholarship. And then based on the name, you can continue to search and find that information. Another area that you can search for is scholarship application. It may bring up a different list of appropriate websites. So there's lots that you can do, and this is all very time consuming, and you may need to partner with your student in order to get this kind of work done, where mom and dad and the student spend time searching and figuring out which ones are appropriate and which ones you may want to be applying to. All right, so that's searching. So first you have to find the scholarships you're interested in, and then you need to apply. Now, a challenge that I've come across quite often, and I think there's a little bit of truth to it, is many of the families I work with have average or slightly above average students coming from an average suburb with average grades that participate and do average when they participate in sports. So they don't have a lot of things that excel, and therefore it's hard to find scholarships that meet the criteria of your student. And that may be a challenge that you're up against, and that's a frustration that a lot of families run up against, and that may be your situation. So that may be a reason why you don't do as much work in scholarships, realizing that perhaps it's not going to be as fruitful as if you had something specific that you could use in order to apply and win these scholarships. All right, the next criteria we want to talk about is applying for the scholarships. How do you apply for scholarships? Well, there's a number of different ways depending on the scholarships themselves, but at most colleges, a number of their scholarships you apply for just by applying for admission and applying for financial aid at that institution. In other words, if you're interested in scholarships from Northwestern, if you fill out an application for admission to Northwestern and you follow that up with an application for financial aid at Northwestern, they're going to automatically consider you for a lot of their various scholarships. And some of those scholarships, again, would be the tuition discount type of scholarships, where at a lot of these colleges, if you meet a certain criteria, you're automatically awarded the scholarship, again, based on those two applications. So if your grade point is this, your ACT score is that, and you apply to this school, you're automatically awarded a $7,000 scholarship. If you do better than that, then perhaps you get a $10,000 scholarship. Now, those types of scholarships, again, are institutional scholarships, and a lot of times there's not anything extra you need to do to be considered. Now, at some colleges, in addition to that, they have additional scholarships that take separate applications, and they're awarded and they're judged more critically than the scholarships I just mentioned. In other words, they may also, in addition to that scholarship, provide a scholarship, and there's only one of them, and it's called, might have a name like the Presidential Scholarship or the Bill Gates Foundation Scholarship or something named after an organization. And there's only one winner for that scholarship. So they're going to take separate applications, maybe separate interviews, and award that scholarship to just one individual. So in that situation, many will apply, one will win. In the typical tuition discount general scholarship, they may award as many of those awards as they have kids that qualify. Now, some of these colleges will publish that criteria right on their website. They'll say, well, we've got these types of scholarships, and if you haven't this criteria, here's what we're going to award. Other colleges don't, use that type of information and do it the same way. They just don't publish it. And at some point, when they see your application for admission and they see that you qualify, they'll send you a letter. So again, another situation where scholarships are awarded after the application, but before financial aid, to just keep people interested in that particular college. So let's say your student applies to George Washington University, very expensive school, somewhere in the neighborhood of $55,000, $60,000. Expensive colleges know they're expensive. So one of the things that they often do is shortly after you apply, if you qualify for one of their scholarships, they may send you a letter that says, congratulations, you qualify for the Dean Scholarship. The Dean Scholarship is an award for $15,000 per year times 4 years for a total of $60,000. Now, there's a number of reasons why they send this letter, but again, one of their goals is to keep you interested. Because right after the student applies, that may be when mom and dad are starting to look at the price tag and going, oh my goodness, this is an extremely expensive college. I don't know if we're doing the right thing by applying. And then shortly after that, you get a letter saying, oh, but you'll get some sort of discount. We'll get a scholarship. So now you start feeling a little better and you're willing to continue the process and do the next step, which is to fill out the financial aid forms and submit them to that same college. So that's another part of the process. So applying. So sometimes you're going to do a general already applied because I applied to the college. And then sometimes you're going to do separate applications at a particular college. And then for all the private scholarships out there, you're going to have to do whatever's required. A lot of scholarships require applications, but they also might have some sort of contest, whether it's artwork or singing or dancing or providing a video or just writing an essay. But there's all kinds of criteria that you're going to have to jump through in order to be in the running for the private scholarship. So that's applying. Now, once you've found the scholarship and you've applied, hopefully you're going to win. But in order to win the scholarship, in a lot of cases, you need to be the top applicant or the top 5 applicants. Being number 34 out of 100 isn't going to help. You have to be top 1 or top 2 at a lot of these scholarships. So how do you actually win the scholarship? Well, you need to stand out. You need to do a really good job on whatever it is that they're asking for, such that you'll be in first place. So if it's a essay writing contest, you need to write a really good essay. If it's a picture contest, you need to have a very interesting picture. You need to excel at whatever it might be. Now, again, if you are applying to scholarships that have unique criteria that not a lot of people can qualify for, again, let's say you need to be a skateboard enthusiast and live in the greater Milwaukee area. Well, that may limit the number of applications they get. So the criteria and the competition might be substantially less than if it's write a 500-word essay about why you need money to help pay for college. Well, that one might be a very generic scholarship. So you need to stand out. And another way that you may be able to stand out is to understand the mission of the scholarship and the organization behind it. Most companies that provide scholarships or private institutions outside of the colleges themselves are providing scholarships for a reason. And I think there's probably 3 categories that they would fall in. One is future leaders. They're hoping to help educate future leaders for their own organization or future leaders in general. They just want the best and the brightest to bubble to the top. Or perhaps they're saying, if we provide scholarships, we might be able to recruit the people we provide scholarships to and who will ultimately work for our corporation and help us along. Another reason is the publicity involved with scholarships. It may help in the recruiting and retention of employees. It may help getting the positive name recognition. Coca-Cola, I'm guessing, likes to be associated with a generous scholarship. It's a positive relationship. Perhaps, some polluting company out there might say, well, in order to get positive PR, we're going to launch a campaign centered around a scholarship contest so that they get associated not just with the bad news, but they also get associated with the good news. And then the last reason that some people get involved is they want to provide education in general. The Gates Foundation, as an example, is providing a lot of money to further education in general and try and increase the overall education of the nation. Other places, they might just be trying to get more or better education in a particular field. Some companies are having a hard time recruiting engineers or nurses or something along those lines. So they just want to provide funds to help get more engineers and more nurses graduated. And then the flip side of that, it may also provide them a recruiting opportunity. Once they graduate, they can then go and hire these individuals. All right, so once we've won the scholarship, the last step then is receiving and spending the scholarship. So if you've won, generally they're going to send you some form of check, either to you directly or to the school that you direct them to send it to. So you just need to make sure that you follow the rules and do what they ask and just process the paper, so to speak, and get the scholarship awarded and sent to the right place. But for some families, there may be some additional opportunities where scholarships generally are tax-free. So if you receive a $10,000 scholarship from the school you're attending and you apply that to tuition, and that's the caveat, if it needs to be applied to tuition, then you're not going to have to pay any taxes on that award. Now, in some situations, it may be to your benefit to apply the scholarship to something that does not make it tax-free, because then the student may have to pay taxes on it, but you might get another benefit instead. And where I've seen this work out is, let's say you receive enough scholarships that it covers all of your tuition. So you're going to a state school, tuition is $12,000, and you won exactly $12,000 in scholarships. So if you apply all the scholarships, they're all tax-free, but now all the tuition is paid, and you might miss out on some other opportunities. Because, as an example, again, as we talked about in a previous podcast, there's some tax credits available. And in order to qualify for the tax credit, you may need to pay for some tuition. Well, if you didn't pay any tuition because the scholarships covered it, you don't qualify for the tax credit. So I've helped people figure out ways to take a scholarship, and instead of applying it tuition, we apply it to room and board. So we take $5,000 of the $12,000 worth of scholarships, and we apply it to the room and board bill instead of applying it to the tuition bill. Now, if you apply a scholarship to room and board, it's not tax-free, so the student has to pay taxes on that $5,000 of income. Well, again, in a lot of cases, it's not going to matter that they have to pay taxes on that, because a lot of times a student's tax bracket is essentially zero. So that although it is a taxable income, the net tax on it is still zero, so you're fine. But why would we do that? Well, then mom and dad could take the tax credit, because they could say, well, wait a minute, we paid $5,000 of tuition, and therefore we're eligible for the American Opportunity Credit or the tuition deduction, or we're eligible to take money out of a 529. So again, there's reasons why you may want to restructure how the scholarship is applied and where. In other situations, I've had a couple families where they got substantial scholarships from the college themselves, and they got an outside scholarship, and they wanted to delay the outside scholarship a year or two to cover a year where they didn't have as much scholarship money. So if you're working with a large institution, if it's the Coca-Cola scholarship or the Kohl's scholarship, there's a procedure, and there's people you can talk to and say, well, I would like my award delayed until next school year. And in some cases, they'll allow you to do that. In some cases, they won't. But, understanding your options and filling out the proper forms so that you do things properly so you don't lose your award is important. But again, and it's rare, but I've had a few students where their awards in the first year was more than they needed in the first year. So they worked with a couple of the scholarship providers and had the awards delayed to the second year to balance things out and help them along the way. All right, I think we're going to wrap things up here. That's, more than you ever needed to know about scholarships. But the last idea I want to hit you with is put together some sort of scholarship plan. We got a lot of the technicalities on scholarships that we just covered, but figure out what your scholarship plan is going to be. If you have a high school sophomore or younger, or even junior or younger, you've got some time. So figure out where scholarships fits into the mix and allocate some of that time to scholarships if you think it's appropriate for your family. In other words, where I've seen success, that's exactly what happened. The family said, a couple times a month, we're going to get together as a family and we're going to do scholarship work. We're going to search together. We're going to work on finding what we need and getting it organized and requesting letters of recommendation and getting everything organized. And we're going to go into our junior and senior year prepared, knowing what we need to do and where the scholarships are and what kind of forms we need to fill out. You can search for scholarships in the sophomore year. If you find one you can't apply to until your senior year, well, you can put it on your calendar and say, don't forget to apply. You can also, I guess, technically apply to scholarships appropriate for sophomores. So you can start this at any time. But again, for most families, you need to allocate the time and spend it appropriately over the course of many months, potentially. Now, if you have a senior and you're kind of in the last legs here, now maybe you focus on just finding the hidden gems or applying to the ones that you're highly qualified for. You might say, well, we don't have enough time to apply to 40. We have enough time to apply to 3 or 5. So we're going to try and very quickly find the 3 to 5 best scholarships for us, the ones that we're most closely matched to, the ones that we're likely to win, and just pursue those scholarships. And then finally, some families you might say, well, based on what I learned, I'm not all that interested in pursuing scholarships at all. We're going to instead pursue other areas, whether it's money from the schools in other directions, or student is going to go and work, or mom and dad are going to work, whatever it might be. So there's lots of other things that you can pursue instead. But if you are interested in pursuing scholarships, what's the next step? Well, re-listen to this podcast once or twice to learn all you can from it. Go find a scholarship book. There's all kinds of people out there that would love to sell you a book about scholarships. And some of them are better than others, but there are some good ones. The Scholarship Lady, Scholarships 101, in a previous podcast, has a really good book on how to get started and where to get the motivation. So you can find some books. There's also, websites you can read and just kind of delve into it and spend some time getting prepared. Okay, so let's wrap up. That's the end of scholarships. We're going to move on now and to Brad Recommends.
The latest tips, tricks, and tools you can use today. This is Brad Recommends on Taming the High Cost of College.
Today on Brad Recommends, I'm going to recommend the Net Price Calculator. Now, this is a little unusual in that there are net price calculators on every college website out there. So let me explain what a net price calculator is. The net price calculator is a calculator that's on the college's website, and it's there to help you figure out what your net price for college might be. So a typical calculator is going to ask you questions about your finances. What is your income and your assets? And some of them are very detailed, and you're going to fill in 40, 50, 60 blanks. Others are very basic, and you only put in 5 or 10 pieces of information. But they take that information, they run some calculations, and they provide some sort of report to help you figure out what your net price of college might be. So as an example, an output might say, well, particular college is a private school, so it says tuition is $32,000, room and board is $10,000, additional expenses are another $5,000, so your total cost is $47,000. Based on the data you entered, you are eligible for the scholarships and grants and loans and these amounts, so of say total of $10,000, so your net price will be $37,000. So the total cost of the school, the 32 is published for you. So 32 plus 10 plus 5 for a total of $47,000. And then they estimate what your loans and grants and scholarships might be. In my example, it was $10,000. And then they essentially give you the net price. In other words, $47,000 minus $10,000 is $37,000. But this is helpful because it gives you a look into what may happen at a particular school as far as what types of loans and scholarships and work study you may be eligible for. And it gives you kind of an early look at how the finances might turn out at a particular college. Now, all colleges are required to have the net price calculator on their website if they participate in federal financial aid, which all reputable colleges do. So they're going to have a net price calculator. Now, some colleges worked really hard on the calculator and it's very robust and accurate and useful. Other colleges did not work on it very hard. Some colleges want you to see the numbers and the net price, so they put it somewhere where it's easy to find. Other colleges would rather you didn't see the net price calculator, so they buried it somewhere on their website. Now, if you type in the name of the school followed by net price calculator in Google, most of the time that'll take you right to their web page and right to where the net price calculator is. But for some colleges, again, they try and hide it, and other colleges, they put it easy to find somewhere on the financial aid web pages. So that's the first caution, is you got to be able to find it. Second caution is some are better than others. Some web-based calculators, the net price calculators, are, again, very accurate. Some are not. and there's no way of knowing. But what you can do is if you have 3 or 4 colleges that are on your list and they're very similar, I would go to the net price calculator for each of them and essentially enter the same types of data and see how the output compares. And then as you start building relationships with the colleges that you're considering and you've applied and so forth, you may have the opportunity when you visit or as part of the process of selecting a school, you may talk to someone on the phone, but you may get the opportunity to talk to them a little bit about what the net price calculator said, whether or not they feel it's accurate, whether or not it's a good predictor for your particular case. But again, it's a tool I don't think a lot of parents are aware of, and it can be very useful. Of course, it is a little bit of a challenge collecting your data, getting it into the calculator, and working through it. That's the net price calculator, available at any college you might be considering. With that, let's wrap things up. I appreciate you spending the time to listen today. I would appreciate it if you could give us a review in iTunes or over at Stitcher, if that's how you come to this podcast. If you're not familiar with iTunes or Stitcher, there are ways that you can actually download this audio file directly to your phone or directly to your computer and not have to visit the website. So if you want to learn more about that, go to Taming the High Cost of College. As well, you can leave us feedback at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. You can send us a voicemail message through the website that we can answer questions here on the podcast, or you can send us feedback via email. I appreciate you listening. Spread the word about this podcast. We're here to help, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Thanks and goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.